This is a $4,000 frying pan, made from sterling silver. And this is my $40 carbon steel pan that I've cooked with for years. This silver pan sent me down a rabbit hole of testing. Stainless steel, carbon steel, cast iron, aluminum, copper, and yes, silver, to find out which metal actually makes the best pan. What I learned made me swap my trusted carbon steel and cast iron pans for a new daily driver. And no, it's not the silver one. I also found a simple mistake that makes every pan perform worse than it should. Fix that, and it almost doesn't matter what your pan is made from. Wait, you're probably wondering why anybody would buy a $4,000 frying pan. I mean, that's insane, right? Let me try to explain. I am obsessed with tools that are thoughtfully designed, well-built, and uncompromising in performance. It's the approach I take with the tools I design and build myself, like the combustion predictive thermometer. It has 8 evenly spaced temperature sensors to find the true core and predict when your food will be ready. It's built for high heat cooking up to 900 degrees, Wi-Fi enabled so you can keep an eye on your cook from anywhere, and you can use it with or without an app using the optional kitchen display. You can learn more about my products here or by going to combustion.inc. Now, back to the silver pan. When I came across engineer turned silversmith Jim Hammond making solid silver pans at Du Parquet Cookware in Rhode Island, I rationalized my purchase was rational. I mean, there's over $1,600 of actual silver in it. So technically, it's an investment that will grow in value. Right? And then there's the craftsmanship, the gentle curves and polished mirror finish. Stout silver rivets bonded to a handle covered in hand-stitched leather. And it has that perfect balance, not too heavy and not too light. On paper, this should be the ultimate pan because it spreads more heat faster than any other metal. To understand why, we need to look at 2 things together. Conductivity, how easily heat moves, and heat capacity, how much heat it holds. The ratio of those 2 measures gives you diffusivity, which is the single best measure for predicting a pan's potential performance for even heating and powerful searing. Let's start with stainless steel, with about 6 units of diffusivity. It's tough and non-reactive, but it is actually terrible at moving heat. Step up to carbon steel and cast iron, both around 10 units of diffusivity, better than stainless, but still pretty sluggish. Then comes aluminum, jumping way up to about 62 units and 6 times better than cast iron at spreading heat. Copper is renowned for a reason, about 97 units, which is why old-school French cookware was always copper. And finally, quite a bit ahead of copper is silver, 147 units. That's about 25 times better at moving heat than stainless steel. The only natural material that moves heat faster is diamond. It sits way off this chart at about 700 units, roughly 5 times better than silver and 120 times better than stainless steel at spreading heat evenly. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a solid diamond frying pan, so I had to settle for silver. But many cooks still swear by cast iron and carbon steel for a perfect sear, including me. That's why this carbon steel pan has always been my go-to. But you know that first pancake never turns out right? That's because it's telling you something about the diffusivity of your pan. So, can a better pan fix that? Same batter, same cooking, but look at this. Totally different results. Pancakes are perfect for showing heat patterns. Even a few degrees difference in the surface temperature changes how it cooks. So each pancake literally maps the hot and cold spots of our pans. Each pan was preheated until its temperature was stable, adjusting the burner so the center of every pan started at the same temperature. Cast iron and carbon steel look almost the same, a burned bullseye in the middle that fades fast towards the edges. That maps to the surface temperature swinging over 100 degrees from the edge to the center of the iron-based pans. The diffusive metal pans? Far more even, less than 20 degrees in most cases. The first pancake knocked down those hot spots and even the surface temperature a little, but even the later pancakes cooked in the iron-based pans still look rustic. the hot spots never really go away. With high diffusivity pans, you don't need that sacrificial pancake. From the get-go, pancakes cooked in aluminum look pretty good. Mostly even, just a hint darker in the middle. Copper is noticeably better, more uniform browning. And silver, it is annoying how perfect the pancake looks. Pancake after pancake came out flawless from the silver pan. Among the high diffusivity pans, aluminum is nearly as good as copper and silver though. Which is weird, right? I mean, silver's twice as diffusive as aluminum. Turns out, aluminum cheats. This pan is twice as thick, 4 millimeters, instead of 2. That extra thickness gives heat more room to move around, like adding lanes to a highway. Now, you might be thinking, why not do that with iron or carbon steel? But you'd need about 70 millimeters, nearly 3 inches of metal, and the pan would weigh more than 40 pounds. So, diffusivity wins for pancakes, but searing's different, right? For a hard sear, you want a pan that can hold a lot of heat, which is why I've always trusted carbon steel and cast iron. If you multiply the weight of the pan by the specific heat of its metal and its temperature, you get a measure of its heat capacity, which is the total energy held inside a pan. Stout cast iron holds about 135,000 joules, the slightly thinner carbon steel pan around 117,000. But aluminum isn't that far behind at 100,000. Copper trails at 88,000, and way behind all the other metals is silver, with about 62,000 joules of stored heat energy, about half that of iron and steel. These rankings are the reverse of our diffusivity rankings. So which wins the race for a hard sear, diffusivity or heat capacity? To keep it fair, I'm taking the burner out of the equation. Every pan starts at the same surface temperature of 600 degrees before the flame is turned off and a single pork chop is placed in the center of the pan. All that matters is the energy stored in the pan. I'm recording 2 things: the sound of the sizzle and what the infrared camera sees. The sizzle tells us the surface is still hot enough to flash water to steam. No sizzle, no sear. And by spray painting the surface of all the shiny pans black, they all have the same emissivity, so the infrared camera can see how the heat flows to where it's needed in each pan. High diffusivity silver. Its heat flows fast towards the food from every direction, and the surface of the pan cools evenly as the sear uses up all of the heat in the pan. This is exactly what you want. Copper's nearly as good, with a steady and even temperature drop across most of the surface, while the sizzling lasts longer from its higher heat capacity. Aluminum's half as diffusive as silver, but its thicker base gives heat more lanes to flow, so its surface also cools evenly as the heat moves around to keep the sear going. Carbon steel. You can still see hot spots around the edges of the pan that aren't contributing to the sear. That's just wasted heat. Cast iron is the same story. The pan is still glowing hot around the food after the sizzle has stopped. Its stored heat simply can't flow through the sluggish metal fast enough to keep the sear going. In the end, fast and nimble silver dumped all its heat into the pork chop in a quick 2.5 minutes, while my heavy cast iron pan kept the sizzle going longer than all the other pans at over 8 minutes, a bit more than 3.5 times as long as silver. So, iron and steel hold more total heat, but it doesn't really matter if the heat can't go to where it's useful, which is under the food. Despite its light weight, aluminum actually holds nearly as much heat as my carbon steel and only about 26% less than cast iron. Its high diffusivity means it can move that heat around the pan to where it's needed, which is why it kept the sear going for well over 6 minutes, besting all but the cast iron pan. So, it's kind of the perfect middle ground. Good diffusivity, plenty of heat capacity, and light enough to easily handle. Maybe there's a reason this pan is ubiquitous in restaurants. Okay, but how do the pork chops actually look? Not fully seared yet. Even when starting the pans at 600 degrees, they all ran out of steam before the chops were fully seared. And these pork chops all look very similar, despite significant differences in both the heat capacity and diffusivity of the pans. So that's pretty strong evidence that what's underneath the pan matters as much or more than the pan itself. Now, you probably think I'm about to compare gas, electric, and induction burners. They all have their pros and cons, and honestly, they can all be made to work, but that's a topic for another video. Now, in restaurants, I mostly cooked on carbon steel pans, on all kinds of burners, and I never once gave a thought to hot spots. The pans just worked, but when I started testing cookware at home, the results were not the same. Professional stoves aren't just powerful, they're oversized. Large, powerful burners, or even enormous French tops that act like one massive, even burner. But domestic gas burners are nothing like that. Smaller rings and smaller flames. And the most common stove in the US isn't gas at all. It's an electric coil, about 6 to 8 inches wide. Watch how my favorite 12-inch cast iron skillet heats on this 6-inch electric burner. There's about a 200-degree variation from the hottest to the coldest spot. Now, an 8-inch pan on an 8-inch coil burner, which reduces the variation in temperature to less than 50 degrees across the bottom of the pan. Same stove, same temperature, and metals with very similar diffusivities, but the pan that fits the burner heats evenly and will cook evenly. I don't know how else to say this, but size matters. Here's a pancake cooked in my 8-inch carbon steel pan on an 8-inch burner. And here's the same pancake in the same pan on a 6-inch burner. You can pretty easily see how much more evenly cooked the pancake is when the burner is sized just right. Here's what's happening. When your burner is smaller than your pan, heat has to spread sideways through the metal before it reaches the food, and that spread is limited by the pan's diffusivity. Professional stoves avoid this by putting the heat everywhere. At home, you can't make your burner bigger, but you can match the right burner to the right pan. For low diffusivity metals like carbon steel or cast iron, having a burner that's at least 90% of the diameter of the pan makes a big difference. Because if the heat only needs to travel straight up from the burner through the pan to the food, diffusivity matters far less. That's why matching your burner to any pan feels like a better pan. So far, we've looked at pans made from single metals, and each has its strength and its weakness. Silver, for example, is impressive for both its performance and its price. Copper is similarly beautiful, but high maintenance. In restaurants where I worked, like the Fat Duck, polished copper like this was for the dining room, not the line. The workhorses were aluminum, carbon steel, and stainless. But you've probably noticed I haven't shown stainless steel in the results so far. That's because a pure stainless steel pan mostly doesn't exist. And that's because pan manufacturers know that stainless is an absolutely terrible metal for moving heat around, twice as bad as cast iron or carbon steel. But stainless is wonderful for durability, strength, being non-reactive and induction compatible, and not needing any maintenance. In that sense, stainless is nearly a perfect metal. Cookware engineers know this, which is why they laminate stainless with high diffusivity metals like aluminum or sometimes copper, or they braze a thick aluminum plate to the bottom. So nearly every stainless steel pan is actually a combination of stainless and usually aluminum. And testing a pan like this would have been misleading since it performs more like the metal at its core and not pure stainless steel. The aluminum core heats quickly, spreads heat to the edges, and buffers small burner mismatches so the surface is evenly hot. The stainless exterior makes it induction compatible and durable. And you can scour it clean. It's not the fanciest pan I own, but it is a very forgiving daily driver. And no sponsorship here, by the way. I bought this pan from Maiden with my own money, and I like cooking with it. My wife likes cooking with it too, because it's lighter than our carbon steel and cast iron pans. And that is another benefit of aluminum cores. They're lighter. Its only real downside is that because it's stainless steel, it never develops that self-healing semi-nonstick patina that is really useful for certain dishes like a classic French omelet where a seasoned surface is unbeatable. And that is why I actually have a second pan for day-to-day use, and it is very close to being my ideal pan. This is an 8.5-inch frying pan from Strata that I bought on Amazon. It's a sturdy tri-ply pan with a stainless steel exterior, a diffusive aluminum core, and important to me, a carbon steel interior. You can see I've built up a nice nonstick patina of seasoning from a lot of cooking. It's not perfect though. The handle's a bit too heavy and it throws it out of balance. I'm willing to overlook that to get the benefits of carbon steel that I love with the performance of aluminum. And while it isn't as nonstick as Teflon, it's nonstick enough that with a bit of practice, you can make a very nice French omelet. And then there's my silver pan. It is absurdly expensive and not a practical purchase. But as a work of craftsmanship of unrivaled performance, it is impressive. Plus, and I must be honest here, I love cooking with it. It is
so choice. If you have the means, I highly recommend picking one up.
Thanks for watching.